Recording.
Okay, now let me make mine into the presentation mode.
Yes. And you're going to introduce yourself. You're going to do better than my introduction, right?
Oh, I'll give it a shot. Thank you very much, Sydney, for having me today. I'm Sarah Masoni, and I'm the Director of Product and Process Development at the Food Innovation Center, located in Portland. Here's a picture of me, and I just have a quick quote that I made up when I was thinking about starting a food product. It's really the hardest part is to make the food and get it into a simple package and see if it sells. And that's where I think we can help people in the food hubs is to just simplify people's thoughts and encourage them to get started. So, the Food Innovation Center is an experiment station located in Portland. So, we're part of Oregon State University's Food Science Department. Uh, there are experiment stations all over the state of Oregon, and ours is specifically focused on sensory science, food safety, and product development. So, we do formulation, scale up, and shelf life testing on my team. And I'll share this presentation with Sydney so she can hand it out to you because I think of you all as trainers. And if we give you the right information, you can use it and share it with the folks that you're working with and send them to us when people need our assistance. So, just really quickly, an outline of how I'm going to be talking about this. You can kind of read that for yourself, and I'll get started. So, what we do is first start by helping people change something from a homemade recipe or something they developed in their kitchen to a formulation. And that has to do with changing that recipe into a formula, which normally means we're looking at volumetric measurements and changing them into weight-based measurements. So, it's important for the kitchen that you have to have scales on hand for people that are starting a food business to really start up correctly with changing their recipes into a formula. There's some very um, low cost scales that you can purchase. We personally like to use scales that measure down to zero point zero 0.01 grams. And then you can get very, very sensitive scales that have a door on the side if you're measuring very small amounts of flavoring systems or enzymes or things like that. But basically, you can take a very small recipe by having an accurate scale and then record the information and scale it up into a larger batch just by having a good scale. So, where do you begin? We really recommend that you start with that recipe like you usually do, but you use a scale or something and something to write with. So, you take your measuring spoons and measuring cups and you use the scale to weigh what you're putting in those volumetric measurements, and then you just write them down. Here's an example of something that you can try at home just to see how it works. This is a 5 ingredient tomato sauce. I've been using this tomato sauce for years with people in the kitchen. And I just have people measure 1 cup of tomato sauce out of the can and then write down the weight. In this case, I was asking people to measure in pounds, but you can also measure in grams. And then just repeat the process down through the list. Once that has been weighed, each item has been weighed, then you're going to actually add them up, add up the weights. Let's see what our next slide says. Here's how you do that. So you can see here we switched over to a bread recipe, and there were 3 cups of bread that weighed 369 grams of flour. The water weighed 283 grams, the yeast weighed 7 grams, and the salt was 9, and we got that total weight of 668 grams. And then what we're going to do is do the calculations to figure out what percentage each of those were of the total weight. We'll come back to that here in a second. Now let's talk a little bit about food safety. There's food safety metrics that your people are going to need to know about for the foods they're producing, and these are the things that help them have an extended shelf life. One of the first ones that is very effective for drier foods is called water activity. We can measure the amount of water activity, which is the moisture that's available for bacteria to grow inside of the food. These are some examples. This looks like a granola and cheese and Cheetos and salami. They all have very different water activities. Let's look at the scale of water activity. So we're using water activity to mitigate microorganisms growing, and it's in a scale of 0 to 1. So 1 would equal pure water, and many of the foods that we love have a pretty high percentage of water. So these in red are the types of foods that have very high water activity. And then you come down a little on the scale to 0.95, and you see that cured meats, ham and bacon, fermented meat, salami, and bread, the water activity begins to be reduced. And that's when the availability for moisture for bacteria to grow starts to be reduced as well. So other foods that are preserved by drying might include cheeses, fruit conserves or jams, pickles, syrups, cakes, dried fruit, dried fish. In this case, we're using sugar and salt and actually fat to reduce water activity. So we start to see the water activity to come down into the area of about 0.8. And if you're working with a Department of Agricultural Experiment Station, agriculture food safety inspector, they're going to ask you for your water activity for these types of foods. And they'll be using that as a safety indicator. So you may find that investing in a water activity meter for the people that you're working with might be a good investment. The magical number for reduction of all types of bacteria for minimal microbial growth is actually below 0.61. And that includes all of these items listed here. You might think of like dried fruit or crackers or cereals or a dry blend of like a cake mix or something like that when you think of a low water activity item, but also very important for things like energy bars. The next one that's very important is a pH meter because people are often making acidified foods like sauces, barbecue sauce, salsa, anything that's fermented where we're changing the pH and increasing the acidity. That's why you would need a pH meter. And the pH meter plus water activity can work together to help extend your shelf life of your food product. Acidified foods really aim to have a pH below 4.6, which is the federal requirement to prevent pathogenic growth. The state of Oregon requests that we have a pH below 4.2. Here's a pH scale graphic for you to use to explain pH to people. You might think about battery acid has the really lowest pH. It's very acidic. It'll burn through our clothes. But look, stomach acid is very close. And then we see lemon, vinegar. Vinegar is probably the most strong organic acid that we can use in our food products and is commonly used in food manufacturing. Tomatoes generally sit around 4 to 4.2, and unbelievably, coffee is acidic. So if you're blending coffee into a food product, you may see some acidification happening. Generally, we think of water as neutral. In some areas, water can be down between 6 and 7. And so we always want to look at our water source to see how it's affecting our food products. Mostly in food manufacturing, we aren't um, changing our foods into base measurement, but if you are baking, you may be changing your pH to more alkaline with a baking soda that you might be using in your recipe. So the Food Innovation Center can assist with food safety testing, but depending on where you are in Oregon, we also might recommend that you find a food testing lab in your area for your clients because the Food Innovation Center isn't really set up for routine testing as you're manufacturing. So if you have multiple samples that you would like tested and you want to get started by using the Food Innovation Center, just contact me and I'll help you get started that way. So when do these tests get done? Usually when we're first starting a product, we want to get those records on file because we need to know if we need to change them for shelf life extension. And if you're doing an acidified food, you're going to have to contact the process authority or the food safety inspector to get approval for your process. So this is a good thing to start with once you've got your recipe changed into a formula is to find out which tests should be done for your product specifically and then to have the food tested. Pasteurization is another important thing to understand. Heat treatment is applied to foods to kill harmful bacteria and extend shelf life. So you may be cooking the food that you're making as well. That would mean that you could be making a barbecue sauce. It could be acidified and then it could be put into a jar and pasteurized so that the product would then become shelf stable. And so understanding the correct temperature, there are lower temperatures at longer times and there are higher temperature for shorter times. So it could be low temperature, long time, or high temperature, short time. So you need to understand the type of food you're making and whether you would need a pasteurization step. So there are ways to test your product for pasteurization that can be done in a very simple manner. And the thing that's important is to understand how it may change the flavor of your food product. We will host people in our kitchen. We will take them into the kitchen. They will bring their food ingredients with them and then manufacture with us. We ask that they purchase a block of time with one of our food scientists, and then we can help them work through recording the recipe and seeing how the product might behave if it goes through a pasteurization. The cost per hour for this type of work is $205 for the food scientists, and we do ask for a 4 hour block of time to complete this work. What else is important for food safety? Our Oregon Department of Agriculture has a tremendous amount of information on their website. You can find it by just Googling oregon.gov and ODA, that stands for Oregon Department of Agriculture, and food safety. You can also Google for Find My Food Safety Inspector and then simply type in your um, zip code, and a list of inspectors will pop up that you can contact directly to help them have them help you figure out what your next steps might be in getting your product license and moving forward with having your product be able to be sold across state lines. So I'm going to talk a little bit about formulating low moisture foods. In this case, we'll look at cookies. So we're going to start with the cookie recipe by volume, and then we'll convert it to a recipe by weight. We'll look at instructions and the importance of detailed process, establish the quality assurance standards for the inconsistency, and then talk about scaling up the formulation for high volume production. So this is a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. I think everyone probably has their chocolate chip cookie recipe memorized. In this one, you can see we have the measurement, then the unit, and then any notes that we might have about how we measure the product ingredient that's going into the cookie. And then just looking at this, I want to just comment about how it would be inconsistent depending upon who was following a volumetric recipe. Oftentimes, when I do the tomato sauce with people in person in the Food Innovation Center kitchen, I notice that people have different ways of using their measuring cups, and things don't always turn out the same way every time. And it's important when you're manufacturing food products that things do turn out the same way every time. And that is the number one reason why you would want to convert over to weight. Essentially, starting a food product, this is the number one important thing for someone to do is to change their product over to a weight-based formula. Second thing that people need to look at is the process. I have a good story about a vague process. My mom loved my grandmother's Italian toasted cookies, which are basically a biscotti. And for years, she couldn't figure out what my grandma meant by a stick of butter. Finally, probably after I don't know how many years, 10, 15 years, she thought about it and she decided maybe grandma meant a pound of butter was a stick of butter, not a quarter pound of butter. So mom went ahead and used a pound of butter instead of a quarter pound of butter, and voila, she discovered what the recipe was supposed to mean. Then she was able to share that information with my dad's brothers and sisters, and everyone was extremely excited because they cracked the grandma code on those cookies. So, grandma had written out a recipe very vaguely, not thinking that anyone would think a stick of butter was only a quarter pound of butter. And it took years for the younger generation to figure it out. So, looking at this recipe and thinking about some of the things that are listed in here, like until creamy, we can really define what creamy means. We need to look at what does 375 mean? Is it Fahrenheit? Is it Celsius? Is it convection oven? What kind of oven are you using? What does a rounded tablespoon mean? How do we know what golden brown really means if we don't know what the moisture loss is or have a way to measure the color of the cookie? So the next thing we want to do is actually go ahead and weigh the ingredients that are in the recipe. And in this case, you can look over on the right-hand column. The total batch weight was 1,461 grams, and every one of these items listed on the left by unit measure have a weight correlating to them. And over here are the instructions. And again, Sydney will be giving you this information so you can use it with your people. So here it is. The information has been converted from grams over into weight percentages. These percentages are super important because you can use them to scale your batch into larger batches, and you can use them to figure out the cost of goods sold. Let's look at the next slide. This will also help you with consistency. So we have consistent units, and we don't have to worry if the sugar was packed in the cup because all we have to do now is weigh it. And then we have our full 100% here. Here's how we got the percentages. We took the weight of the chocolate chips and we divided it by the total weight of the batch. And that told us, and multiplied by 100, we found out that it was 23.27% of the batch. And here's the math over here. This math we actually learned in 5th grade, and now we can use it as adults to make a food product. It's amazing. So also converting to a detailed process is very important. You want to know what the variables are in your recipe. They might include the type of oven you're using, what units used to measure, what mix times, and for each step, how you have quality specifications are very important too. For instance, the shape of an unbaked cookie dough ball, the weight of the finished cookie, how to calculate moisture loss, and the use of some laboratory equipment. So here is a detailed process for how to make that chocolate chip cookie. It talks about the dry ingredients, how to cream the moist ingredients, the amount of time that you need to do each step, and the amounts of ingredients that are being used can be correlated, I believe, in a flow chart. We don't have the flow chart yet. It's coming up. So this is a very detailed, repeatable process. It's considered standard operating procedures. These are procedures that you can use to teach people that are making your product for you, and also to teach the inspector exactly what it is that you're making. Here's some additional moisture loss and water activity information. We talked about water activity earlier, and in cookies, water activity is very important. We want to have the water activity below 0.65 in a cookie to make sure that it can sit on the shelf safely and not make anyone sick. I think my example for water activity is one time I bought a cheese and bacon bagel that somebody had made and delivered to a coffee shop, and I ate it. They reheated it for me, but I ended up getting a food poisoning from it because somewhere in the process they didn't follow correct handling, and I probably got salmonella or staph and ended up becoming sick from it. So if you're using certain types of ingredients combined with other ingredients, you need to really follow the food safety and quality attributes using some scientific equipment if you're going into distribution. Here's an example of a kind of a randomly shaped cookie and one that came out with a detailed process. Now I've been seeing people shape their cookies very systematically after baking using a circular motion with a cookie ring. So you may have been able to save this type of cookie that's kind of random looking. But in any case, we're trying to make our food look the same way in every time that we make it. And there's some notes about each of those cookies. So what's next? We looked at how to convert the batch of cookies that anyone can make in their home kitchen to a weight-based formula for a robust process outline. And we've shown how to make a detailed process of a weight-based formula more consistent and a desirable process. So now let's see about scaling up. So the cost of goods sold is really about comparing bulk pricing options to help you choose who your vendors are. So you may find that you can buy your flour in 25-pound sacks or 50-pound sacks. You might end up start buying butter in 40-pound blocks. And using the percentages really helps you create some decision-making tools that can help you make a better process and a lower cost food item. Here come the process flow charts. Remember the detailed process that we looked at? All those details? They really help your product become turnkey. Giving a visual representation, it allows people to get a view of what your process is. and it is useful for training and transitioning to a co-packer and food safety inspections. So here's an example of a process flow chart for the cookies. This is actually the very beginning of good manufacturing practices and the Food Safety Modernization Act. So if you're able to encourage your food people to start with these few basic items that we're talking about today, they'll really be a step ahead as they scale their business and begin to grow. So we usually have a refrigerated section. We may have frozen, and then we also have shelf stable. And we talk about how the product ingredients are stored, and this will be important for the inspector to know how you plan to store things. And also, it could have another section over here that talks about allergens and allergen management. In this case, we would be managing nuts and flour. Both those are allergens. And over here, we would have dairy and eggs. Those are both allergens as well. And then this actually talks about depositing the cookie. Depositing could mean a scoop, or it could actually be a machine. And we would want to know what the raw weight of that cookie dough piece would be and what we're going to do with it after it's formed. In this case, it's going in the oven at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time. And we can check the moisture loss to verify the cookie has been baked long enough. And then it goes into a packaging line. We do another water activity check after the product is cooled, and then it goes into packaging, and it's ready to sell once you finish this process. You can create a legend for your flow chart. Here's some examples. So quickly, what if you're going to make a beverage? I know I'm going through a lot of stuff here, but it's so important. Here's a flow chart for a beverage, which actually, this does not look like a beverage. This looks like a salad dressing. We got lemon, egg yolks, water, and garlic puree, and some additional spices. And we're going to stream in some olive oil, making the emulsification. Then we're going to check the pH to make sure it's at 4.2. And then this product is going into the bottle and it's getting pasteurized. So it's going to be able to be stored on an ambient shelf. It's not going to require refrigeration. Some notes about reformulation. Sometimes when you try to do a process, you do need to look at your product and evaluate the cost. So once you've gotten your percentages done and you suddenly need to figure out how much it costs, and you figure out you have a really expensive ingredient in there, then you might have to seek out different suppliers and find lower cost ingredients. This happens often. We'll develop a product that's so delicious, it's the gold standard, and then suddenly, whoops, we can't afford to make it because we have to charge $100 for a slice of cake. And we can't really do that. It's not sustainable. So these are some of the issues you might have to work on as a product is being developed. And just remember, not all ingredients are the same. When I was working at Garden Burger, the purchasing agent decided to buy a lower cost ingredient. It was garlic. At the time, China was bringing garlic online, but the flavor profile was not similar to domestic garlic. And we had hundreds of thousands of garden burgers made with garlic that was not representative of the garlic flavor that we needed. So just remember, when you switch an ingredient supplier, you do need to put it into your recipe and make sure that it still tastes like you want it to taste. These are important. This is an ingredient specification. In this case, it's avocado powder, and it shows how the avocado powder needs to be listed on an ingredient statement. So for every ingredient that someone is using in their formula, they should have this ingredient specification on hand for each ingredient. So people think that if they're using this avocado powder, they can just list it as avocado. It is not true because it is actually being plated onto an ingredient called maltodextrin, which is also modified potato starch. It has citric acid and other ingredients in there to preserve freshness. So all of those descriptive ingredients that are in the avocado powder need to be included in your ingredient statement. Um, Also, this just gives a few tips about how to choose ingredients because there will be minimum order quantities, MOQs, from the suppliers. It's not always ideal for startups. And sometimes what you can do is find a broker that has the ingredients available. So you have to sort of search around and do a little research when you're trying to make something new and different. You may have to put a little extra work in to get the exact ingredients you want. We can help with this at the Food Innovation Center. The process authority is important for the acidified, pasteurized sauces and soups and things that are on the shelf. And you can go to afto.org to find the process authority list. You can work with any process authority on the list to get your process approved for manufacturing, and your Oregon Department of Agriculture inspector will be asking for that approval. Product labeling requirements, those are a federal requirement. The Department of Ag has created a really nice little worksheet for you. They've highlighted some of the very important things that you need on your package. You do need to have your brand name prominently displayed at the top, and then you have to list what food is in the package, and you do have to list it in 2 different weight increments. You have to include the ingredient statement and the allergen statement and who the product is manufactured by. The Food Innovation Center can help. We do have a database that we can help with nutrition facts panels. You are allowed to do a database generated nutrition facts panel. And if your sales are less than, I believe, $50,000 per type of product, you can file for an exemption, which allows you to just leave off the nutrition data and just simply follow the very simple information of the brand, the name of the food, and the weight in grams and ounces, and then the ingredient statement and where the product is manufactured by. So here's some information about nutrition facts panels and ingredient statements. Again, additional information on allergen statements. And this is just a snapshot of how we would use a database to create a nutrition facts for a food product. There is a USDA nutrition database that people can look at, but there are some intricacies about rounding rules. So if you want to try and create your own label, you will need to study the rounding rules through the Nutrition Labeling Education Act. And so I recommend that you work with somebody who has experience and so you don't have to overthink it. Here's an example of a nutrition facts panel. This is for the cookies. And there are different formats for the nutrition facts panel that you can use depending on the packaging size that you have. Here's the full ingredient statement that you would have to use with the allergens highlighted. So it has milk, soy, wheat, almonds. They used almonds in their cookies and eggs. And then you can restate it here at the bottom. Reference amounts. So if you look back on this, where do we go back? Let's go back. I'm going to go back to here. So this serving size is the reference amount. And so what I would do is just go to the category that you're going to sell in and look at other people's packaging to find out what the representative sample is. So it looks like this is some kind of a sauce. And 2 tablespoons is the volumetric measurement that somebody purchasing the product needs to understand, because home kitchens would be using a volumetric measurement, and then you would take the volumetric measurement and weigh it so that you could accurately formulate the nutrition facts panel in that database. The federal government does require accurate labeling for weights and measures. A long time ago, I'm thinking like back to the 80s when we weren't very online oriented. One of the local, oh, I remember the Weights and Measures Department of Ag published all of the weights for the gallon of milk for the inspection that was done, and many of the dairies were underfilling the gallons of milk. So they shamed the dairies by posting who was underfilling gallons of milk. Isn't that awful? But there's requirements from the federal government that you must never underfill the product that you're manufacturing. So you have to always have your weight just a tiny bit over the stated weight on the package. Here's some weights requirements. You can look at this if it's something that you're interested in. You want to know exactly what your package should be. You can look it up using the handbook. And that was a lot of information. I'm going to turn off the presentation. I'm happy to help you with any questions that you might have for the remaining time. And here's some other resources, and I'll share this again with Sydney and she can pass it along. There's a fun podcast Sarah Marshall and I have called Meaningful Marketplace. If anybody's interested in being on that, you can contact us and we'll invite you as a guest. And that is my presentation. Let me see if I can stop sharing.
Sarah, that was like getting a mini product development, a speed product development workshop.
Yeah, it
Um,
was. I hope it wasn't too much.
no, I think honestly, I think this is going to be a really useful resource for our hubs that are working with CPG folks, because they come across a lot of these questions. So having this resource laid out like that, I think is going to be really helpful. Carrie had a couple of questions, and then I have a couple of questions after Carrie's.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, so we have a new kitchen client who is freeze drying beef liver.
Okay.
And it sounds like, and he's grinding it up into powder and packaging it. So he wants to know like what the nutritional content of it is. And I mean, it sounds like you just determine nutritional facts by a recipe, but what we're wondering is, does that nutritional value change while in the freeze drying process? And how
Yeah.
would we adjust that for the because you take 15 pounds and it becomes like a half a cup of powder. And so how do you convert that into the nutrition
Yeah.
facts? We're trying to figure that out. Is that something the
Yeah.
Food Innovation Center would do if I referred him there?
Yeah, we can totally help with that. But
Sure.
basically, they weigh the product before they
Mhm.
freeze dry it and then weigh it afterwards. And that's the percentage of moisture loss. And that can be put into the database. But I would caution you with that type of product, he may need to be under USDA inspection.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah. So there's a website, a USDA website. I think the local USDA inspection is done through the Oregon Department of Agriculture if they're doing direct sales only. If they're selling it directly to the consumer, I think it can be inspected by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. Have they already spoken to them?
Yeah, he's working with our inspector
Okay,
pretty
so
regularly. He just was
yeah,
asking me where he can send his product to get the nutritional value, you know, certification, he's calling it. And I'm like,
okay, so I'll put a link in the box for a food testing lab, so
okay.
you can use that to refer them. That'd probably be the best thing.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, are there any other questions?
Oh, whoops. Buck had one. Sorry, I was on mute.
Hi, Buck.
Right, sir. I just put in a chat is the ODA labeling equivalent to the FDA labeling requirements.
Yep, it is.
Okay, and then what was that threshold? You said there was a certain number that you didn't have to put the nutrition label on. Was that sales number?
Yeah, I think it's $50,000.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There, I have a question about authority.
Okay.
Can can you define what process authority is and then and then define it in opposition to what the ODA inspector does? I think that's kind of a
Okay.
mushy. It's mushy to
Yes,
me.
it's mushy. There's a federal requirement for training called the Better Process Control School. And it really starts there if you have an acidified food like barbecue sauce or salsa or tomato sauce or anything that you want to can, like you would can at home. Even something like a jam or a jelly might have to be approved. Anything where you're adding acid to a non-acid food is an acidified food, and you have to take that class. So that's really where you start. It's about $400. You take it online, and then you become kind of certified to handle your food, and you learn all about the processing. And then once you recorded your recipe into a formula and you've tested for pH and water activity, and in some cases the Brix level, which is the sucrose concentration, you take that recipe, your process flow chart, and the lab testing, and you submit it to a process authority who will review your process and confirm with the the science-based information that the process that you're doing is approved for acidified foods. And then you have this letter from the process authority saying that your process has been approved. And that's what the Oregon Department of Agriculture is looking for, to confirm that you had your process reviewed by a process authority and that you have taken the Better Process Control School. So it's kind of
Okay.
like a certification that you know what you're doing, because creating that acidified food, you're following specific guidelines of time and temperature to make sure that the center of the jar hits that temperature that you've agreed to every single time you do the process. So it's your commitment to follow the process that you've determined and had approved every single time you make the product, that you won't be taking shortcuts, you won't be changing it. And every time you have a new product or a new process, you have to go through that same process and get it approved by a process authority. And I did want to add that Mark Daschle, who was our process authority for like the last 40 years, is retired. So you have to find a new person to work with in that list from AFTA.
So process authority is it only required for acidified foods?
Yes.
Okay, and that's because those are foods that you're adding acid to because they're very dangerous if they're not brought up to the right or brought down to the right acid level. And we don't want to kill anybody with botulism, et
Yeah,
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you
exactly.
do process authority. That's confirming that your science is good, the
Yep,
recipe is good. And then you go to ODA for your actual license to produce that product. Is that the
exactly.
correct? Okay, thank
Exactly.
you.
hmm
I'm sort of embarrassed to admit I've never really
No,
fully
I mean,
understood the process authority. I don't do CPG.
well, it's confusing too when you're first starting, because low acid low acid is actually the food that doesn't have acid in it. And low pH is the food that has acid in it. So it's very confusing to people when they're first starting, and all of that is explained in the Better Process Control School. There's one through Tennessee State University. I think UC Davis has a class. You can just Google Better Process Control School online and then get yourself signed up, or tell the people that you're working with that they'll have to take that class. It is a hurdle to manufacturing. We do recommend that even if you're having somebody co-manufacture your product, that you, as the owner of the product, have taken that class so you understand the language and understand what how your product's being manufactured.
Thank you. I also had some questions about the um what'd you call it? The thing that describes the water loss in
Water activity?
production. Thank you. Not water activity, but the
Moisture.
loss of water like in the baking in your example with
Oh,
the
the
cookies. Like you're
yield.
measuring
Yeah,
the
it's the
loss of water. Okay.
yeah. So basically, if I were making like a pot of barbecue sauce,
Hmm.
I would weigh all the ingredients going in and write the weights down and then have my total weight, and then um and maybe even weigh the product in the pot and then weigh the product before you take any out, or do anything after you've cooked it, so you can find the difference between the original weight of all the raw ingredients and the final weight of all the cooked ingredients.
And you're doing that so that you can then say if you're adding acid after a cooking process, so that you
Actually,
can then measure that, or like what is that?
the reason
Okay.
we're doing it is mostly for the nutrition data.
Oh, okay.
So when we take moisture away, we're concentrating the nutrition. So that's why a lot of food processors want to make sure everything they make has a lot of water in it, because water is generally considered free. And as you concentrate food, a really good example of a concentrated food is jerky, because you're taking something with, 98% water, and then we're taking all that water away. Has anyone ever noticed that jerky is really expensive? It's because we removed the majority of the water. So you may be, for instance, buying a fish that's $10 a pound, but when you're drying it, you're going to have to charge $30 a pound because you're no longer selling the water. You've removed the water and concentrated the nutrients.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? I'm sort of hogging the question floor. I have like five more questions, but there may be other people.
What other questions do you have?
Um, I am interested in knowing. Okay, so now we know what the Food Innovation Center can do and the ways that it works with entrepreneurs. I'm interested in knowing a little bit about the the cost to access some of those, and let's assume that we're working with very small scale makers. Like what are the costs that a small scale maker might run into? And for these guys who sort of end up functioning as navigators or technical assistance providers, um, what type of entrepreneur is it appropriate to connect with the Food Innovation Center? Like we don't want to shovel a bunch of folks over that like aren't even ready for your services.
Yeah. So, I was thinking if I open up our website and I can share again, I can show you. So if you go to the Food Innovation Center website, I'm there now. Everybody see the website?
Yes, thank you.
Um, this section right here is product development, and you can just click on this first one or come down to new food entrepreneurs. Any of these will open up and it tells you about all the things that we do. And basically, you can have somebody just click the connect with us button. Come on, buddy. My computer's going slow. Basically, you connect with us and it'll open up a questionnaire in our CRM system,
Hmm.
and people can just fill this out the best you can. You don't have to have all the details, but you just fill it out and then submit it, and that will put you in queue to get a call or be contacted by somebody on our team. And you can also pay an invoice here. And I think
But
we
how
have,
much are we paying for that invoice? Is it an
yes,
hourly charge, Sarah, or what's the?
yeah. So I don't think we have any information listed about costs on the website. I'm going to close that. Um, Once we receive the information from the food entrepreneur, then we'll kind of figure out how we can best serve them. Um, Most everyone can get a 15 to 30-minute call without any cost. I think you can select to meet with me directly. But if you do need some assistance, like you want to come in and have us help you scale your recipe, for instance, if you're nervous about going from your volumetric to your weight-based recipe, you can select to have a one-on-one meeting in our kitchen, and I can help you record that information and get you started on your process flow chart and all that, and it's $205 an hour. But my hope is that as people that have kitchens, that you could, with the information that I shared with you, that you could confidently help somebody transition a volumetric recipe into a by weight recipe. Many of you started off as food entrepreneurs and have already done that type of work. It's, it's important because it's going to help your people be successful if they know exactly what they're doing and how much the product costs. Um, but basically, it's $205 an hour. And then you may run across some folks that have a budget to work on, growing their business by hiring food scientists. And we'll actually meet with you and then determine what a project would be. And you could spend anywhere from $1,000 up to $25,000 working with the Food Innovation Center.
And some examples of projects like that, that might be folks that are looking to scale out of sort of this home scale of recipe and moving into, maybe they need to move towards using essences rather than fresh juice,
Yeah,
maybe folks that are wanting to develop a shelf stable product and they've been doing like a beverage that needs to be kept
yeah,
cold, things like that. Is that
yeah,
like the point, which is?
exactly. Or maybe somebody wants to learn how to carbonate something, or they are using cornstarch off the shelf from the grocery store as their thickening system and the product separating in the
Mhm.
bottle. You want to know how to make it stable, things like that.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Sarah. Um, are you still doing, are the Get the Recipe to Market program? That's still a thing that happens sometimes. Is that correct? Is that,
It is. It happens in the spring and in the fall, and that's through Portland Community College. It's
can
called
you
Getting
describe
Your
that program?
Yeah, getting your recipe to market has been going twice a year for the last 20 years, and they have anywhere from 15 to 30 companies join that program each session. It costs about $2,500 to join, and at the end of it, it is online now, but at the end, there is the opportunity to meet with new seasons buyers to learn about how your product presents, and potentially you would get your product into the store through that meeting. And so it talks about business development and all the business related, marketing related things that you need to do to have a successful journey with your food product.
And what's the ideal entrepreneur? Is it a competitive program? And what's the ideal entrepreneur for that program? So if Carrie's working with somebody,
I would say
how does
somebody,
she identify like
yes,
who she should connect?
somebody who's maybe been selling in the farmer's market for a year or so and they really want to get into the store. They've been selling direct and people are asking them, hey, farmer's market isn't year round. I really want to make sure I have this product in my pantry all the time. Where can I also buy this product? So if you're getting your your consumers are asking, where can I buy this? Then that's really an indicator that you might want to switch over to a product that's, you know, commercially prepared to go into the local food system.
Thank you. That's helpful. There's so much out there that I have trouble keeping track of who should be where. Carrie, you have a question?
Yeah, I had another kitchen client ask um it where he could get a feasibility study done to determine if his product, his idea was even like demanded by the market. Thing the Food Innovation Center does, or is there a different resource you would refer us to?
Actually, feasibility study can be done using AI.
Really?
Yeah, why not? Um, and you can um, just go into AI, chat, Mike, whatever the other one, Copilot, whoever you use, and just say, I'm interested in creating a feasibility study for blah, blah, blah for this market, and just kind of, look at it that way. Um, if you want to use someone on campus, you can approach the business school. They have projects that can be done through the marketing. I think the 300 level classes will often have capstone projects that they want to work with. I know Portland State has a food business group also that can do that, and OSU. And then even you could consider the Small Business Development Center. I see Christy listed that as a possibility.
Yeah. I don't know if you're aware, but our SBDC in Jackson and Josephine County just closed down, so we don't have SBDC in this area anymore.
Yeah. So I just did a plan for I did a feasibility study for a fisherman down on the south coast for tuna, and I did it all through AI and data from him. So, but the agricultural economists are also ones that you can ask. They're also in the College of Ag. The economists are always interested in helping with that stuff. And also, from the university standpoint, anyone working in extension should be able to help with that type of work. What was the food product that's looking at a feasibility study?
It, I think it was some kind of mushroom product
Oh,
integrating with there's a Caribbean chef that wants to integrate mushrooms into some kind of rub, and it was a little nebulous to me, but
I mean, sometimes when people get caught up in that type of minutia, they just never even go anywhere, quite honestly, when they're startups. It's really that's why at the beginning of my presentation I say what we really need to do is just encourage people to make their product, get it in a package, the minimal process, and start selling it at the local farmers market, just with using the minimum requirements to see if people even like it. We can spend so much time researching and beating ideas to death that we actually miss an opportunity. And so it's better to just get them into the kitchen and making the product and trying to sell it as the first step.
I also offered to just host a sampling to get like one-on-one consumer
Yeah,
feedback.
actually, on
Um,
our website, we have this other thing under the sensory. I'll show it to you. It's called,
is
um,
it like a scorecard you give out to
yeah,
people?
hold on. It's in the sensory section. Let's see. I think back over sensory testing, market research for market readiness. And this has a ballot sample report and ballot, and you can download all of this stuff. Um, I also get the ballot. So here's an example. The ballot was created about something, a Marionberry drink, looks like. And they can get all of this data um, by giving out samples using this workbook. There's an example. I'm not going to go through and do this because they'll get excited about something that's not going to happen, but you can have your person go through and use this. It's free. So maybe that would be a good thing for you to do. There's a manual. What's the manual look like? Okay, here's the manual. Oh, I even helped with it almost 10 years ago, and it tells all about how to do consumer research, how to create a ballot, how to conduct the consumer testing survey, how to enter the data, and then evaluate and use the information. Maybe this would be something that he would like or they would like. I know some people are really knowledge based and they want to have some quantifiable data, um, and that would make them feel more comfortable. So that would be something that you could offer is that free tool.
That's amazing. I did not know that tool existed, Sarah, by the way. So I'm excited
Isn't
to have
that
that
great?
uncovered in this meeting. New
Yeah.
stuff.
Woohoo. Uh-huh. No secrets in this call.
No, it's all about putting things into a public forum.
Right now, I think it's recorded too, so you can broadcast it on YouTube.
Oh, you bet. You're a star now. Do we have any other questions from this group? What? All right. Well, Sarah, is there anything else, any last minute words of wisdom or advice that you want to give this group so that they can share with the food entrepreneurs that they work with?
I would just say, I'm all about transparency and I hate being a gatekeeper. So if somebody's trying to do something and you just feel uncomfortable with it or it's something that you aren't familiar with, just have them fill out that form and get in touch with us and we can help point people in the right direction. If you think about people who are trying to do something new, it takes a ton of courage for them to reach out and ask for help. That's really the first step. And then again, just getting that product to a simple state of into a package and selling it locally, even to just friends and family, is really the best way to get started. Farmers markets and holiday bazaars and things like that are the best. And it can grow very fast online, selling online. One of the products we developed during COVID is called Lentiful, and it's a cup of lentils with vegetables and seasoning. They started, I think, in 2020, 2019, something like that. The first year selling with ads on Facebook, they hit 1 million in sales.
Wow. I can't believe they're that big now.
They're
That they were
huge.
able,
They're in like thousands of stores and stuff. They just went crazy. People love that product.
it's a cool
And
product.
yeah. And so somebody might be sitting on an idea that, we just don't understand or whatever. And so our responsibility is just to get those creative people in touch with the people that can kind of help elevate their idea to the next level. One product that I kind of many, many years ago didn't really understand how it could be done was the Jacobson salt that now is, as you all know, is a very successful company that's harvesting water from the coast. And, they set up a dehydration system there and they make tons and tons of salt. Well, when he first started, he was going to put ocean water in blue barrels and bring it to the Food Innovation Center. And I told him I didn't think he could afford to pay the rate that we had to charge for him to have a pot sitting there evaporating. And so he moved on to another kitchen and negotiated to work there. And I always think, oh, if I only would have just said okay. I was like a gatekeeper. I said that we couldn't do it, right? But we could have if I would have just thought a little bit bigger.
Oh. Well, I think that the takeaway is the Food Innovation Center is a huge resource with a tremendous amount of capability.
Yeah.
And if you have entrepreneurs that are running into issues that you can't help them navigate because you don't have the knowledge or the background, one, we have this recording that you can refer folks to that they can kind of get that little quick and dirty product development workshop. Two, the Food Hub Network has sponsored some of these in-person product development workshops around the state. We don't have any coming up right now, but we probably will do it again in the year or so. Three, you can refer them to the Food Innovation Center and have them fill out that form. And the Food Innovation Center has even more navigation resource than you do or we do and can help them
Yeah.
get connected to the right people. And three, if they're thinking big and they really want to get into stores and, get into distributed markets, there is the get your recipe to market program that can help them navigate specifically for that kind of market, which is pay for play. But for somebody who's thinking big, that might be worth it to them. Does that sound like a
Yeah.
fair summary?
Yeah. Yeah. And we never actually know what people are willing to invest in their idea either.
Yeah,
So, one of the things I've learned to ask people is, do you have a budget for this project? And asking that question can always feel a little bit weird, but I mean, it's business, right? So if you think about like, well, if you're going to Vegas, you usually say, I'm gonna, spend $50 a day, or, what are you willing to lose to gamble on this idea that you have? And that's an investment in the idea. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Any last questions for Sarah? I think we're good. Sarah, thank you so much for doing that. This is a huge resource. Plus, I'm very excited about your product, your market research manual that I will
Yeah.
be making sure is available on our resource site too, so that it gets some play as folks navigate for folks.
That'd be good.
I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for making the time for us.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. I love seeing you. All
Good
right.
to see you.
Until next
Bye.
time. Bye.